The 90s were an up and down time for the WWF, just catching the back end of Hulkamania and the golden period in Europe at SummerSlam 1982, where the company had relied mainly on the big guys to bring in the big crowds for the first 8 WrestleMania events, with the smaller hard workers being mainly an afterthought on the undercard. However, following the steroid allegations, the company decided to take a different direction, focusing on those smaller guys, bringing in more technical matchups to generate interest and excitement. Now, a lot of people rag on the new generation era and the poor gimmicks and characters, despite the superstars that came through and shone in those years, including Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, The Undertaker, Steve Austin, and The Rock, while the Attitude Era was just full of over-the-top characters and storylines. Although, during both these eras, there were several other genuine stars who could have broken through, and could have been bigger stars in their own right, but for one reason or another, never got the chance. Therefore, here are 10 new generation and Attitude Era wrestlers who should have held the WWF title. Number 10. Tito Santana. A mainstay of the WWF and pro wrestling in general, the man known as El Matador had won many titles all over North America. However, his lone WWF Championship opportunity came in 1984 against the Iron Sheik, where the match ended in double disqualification. Soon after, Sheik lost the title to Hulk Hogan in a move that would change the direction of the WWF, and Santana would not feature in the title picture again. There was always hope for Santana, due to his ability, as he feuded with the likes of Don Morocco and most famously Greg Valentine over the Intercontinental title, teamed with Rick Martel as part of Strikeforce, feuding with the Hart Foundation and Demolition, and won the first match at the original WrestleMania. However, he would end up with an unenviable record of 2-7 at the first 9 WrestleMania events. A Santana title reign was nearly a reality in 1992. Following revelations of steroids being rife in the company, management decided, out with the old, in with the new, and drew up a list of potential candidates to be the face of the new generation era. The final decision came down to Santana to expand into the Central and South American markets, and Bret Hart to expand relations north of the border, with the Canadian being given the nod due to his age. Following this decision, Santana became a jobber to the stars before leaving the company for a short time in 1993 and returning as a commentator. Number 9. Jerry the King Lawler. The King made his professional wrestling debut in 1970 at the age of 21. Over the next 20 years or so, he would become one of the biggest stars in the history of the sport, winning titles in every promotion he appeared in, facing off against some of the other biggest names in America. Initially as a conniving heel, and then as a beloved babyface. He even made national news with his famous spat with Andy Kaufman, where he put him in hospital and attacked him on the David Letterman show. When Lawler came to the WWF in late 1992, he initially worked as an announcer, before engaging in a 3-year-long feud with Bret Hart, and occasionally other members of his family, which would be named Feud of the Year in 1993, and cemented Lawler as one of the company's top heels. As well as his big feuds, he was involved in some horrible feuds too, including against Doink the Clown, as both men drafted 3 midgets for an elimination match at Survivor Series 1994. From 1998, the King would wrestle very rarely to focus on commentary, and developing a legendary partnership with Jim Ross. In a way, much like with Ted DiBiase, the King had many other titles to his name and strings to his bow, so perhaps he didn't need to hold the belt. He was given a few title matches later in his career, however the WWF title is the one big prize missing from his cabinet. Then again, the King is now in the Hall of Fame for his work as wrestler and as a commentator, so that probably makes up for it. Number 8. The British Bulldog. Just by looking at Davey Boy Smith in his career, you'd think he was exactly what the WWF looked for in a main event star. He looked great, he was a great worker, he started off in a successful tag team with the Dynamite Kid as the British Bulldogs, and then excelled as a singles competitor, headlining SummerSlam 1992 with his brother-in-law Bret Hart and winning the Intercontinental title. He would then go on to challenge for the top title against the likes of Diesel, Bret, and Shawn Michaels, and was millimetres away from winning the 1995 Royal Rumble match from the number 2 position, but for Michaels managing to pull himself back into the ring and eliminate a prematurely celebrating Bulldog. In many ways, Smith could be seen as the classic Nearly man, who people love to see and is always there or thereabouts, but never got to be the top guy, similar to Mick Foley or Dean Ambrose. The only difference is, they eventually got to hold the belt. Bulldog would make several switches back and forth between the WWF and WCW in the 90s, most notably in 1997 following the Montreal Screwjob, as he followed Bret Hart to the other side. He would return in 1999, but he never seemed to quite fit in the Attitude Era, was forced into rehab, and then sadly passed away in 2002. Number 7. Razor Ramon. Scott Hall joined the AWA in 1985, just after Hulk Hogan had left the promotion, and owner Vane Gagne had a vision to push Hall as the next Hogan due to his height and look. He encouraged Hall to mimic Hogan's style, and following a run with the tag titles with friend Kurt Hennig, he had several shots at the AWA title. However, as the AWA began to fade away, Hall soon left the company. Several years later, Hall arrived in the WWF and created his Razor Ramon character straight from the Al Pacino Scarface character, which Vince McMahon had never seen before. After several big feuds, including a shot at Bret Hart's WWF title at the 1993 Royal Rumble, Ramon would go on to win the Intercontinental title a then record 4 times. Hall became extremely popular with the fans and had many great matches, including 2 ladder matches with Shawn Michaels over the Intercontinental title. The first of these, at WrestleMania 10, won Match of the Year and gained 5 stars from the Wrestling Observer. He also became close friends with Michaels himself, along with Kevin Nash and Hunter Hearst Helmsley, and would famously become known as The Click. Despite this though, Hall was never pushed towards the main event scene, as he was portrayed as a face and was lower on the order compared to Michaels, Bret Hart and Diesel, while his pleas to turn heel were turned down. Following his feud and match with The Undertaker at WrestleMania 11 being rejected and lack of advancement, Hall would leave for WCW in one of the most famous angles in wrestling history, as Hall and Nash joined Hulk Hogan to create the New World Order. Number 6. Vader. Everyone has heard this story. It's one of the biggest missed opportunities and or travesties, depending on your opinion, in WWF history. Following a stint in the AWA after a knee injury cut short his NFL career, Vader became a household name around the world, wrestling in Japan, Europe and Mexico, at one time holding heavyweight title belts in 3 continents. He later moved to WCW, winning the big gold belt 3 times, feuding with the likes of Sting, Ron Simmons and Ric Flair. Then, in January 1996, Vader debuted in the WWF, and his initial run was perfect. He entered the Royal Rumble, squashing everyone in his wake before being dumped out by Shawn Michaels. He then attacked the Heartbreak Kid, threatened and hospitalized WWF President Gorilla Monsoon, and continued his dominance until finally being given the shot at the title against Michaels at that year's SummerSlam. Sadly, that's where things start to fall apart. The original plan was for Vader to push Michaels to the limit at SummerSlam, win the title at Survivor Series, and then lose it back to Michaels at the 1997 Royal Rumble in Shawn's hometown of San Antonio. However, there were many issues backstage at the time. Vader was reluctant to change his name to the Mastodon as Vince McMahon requested. This in turn caused Vince to lose interest in the character. And finally, despite Vader having met and worked with Shawn in the AWA, Michaels was in full prima donna mode at that point and blew up at Vader during a match, and eventually had the feud changed. Vader would remain a monster, but the shine was very much off the apple. He would have a few more high-profile feuds, but would soon fade into the background, before returning to Japan in late 1998. Number 5. Goldust. Aptly named the Bizarre One, Dustin Reynolds' flamboyant Goldust character is seen as one of the most controversial in WWF history. After a short spell in the company in 1990, followed by 5 years in WCW, the Goldust character first appeared in late 1995, and many people, fans and opponents alike, were very unsure how to react to him. His portrayal left many of his opponents and contemporaries to question whether the direction was wise, or the attention it garnered would help or hinder the company. Despite the worries, Goldust would win the first of 3 Intercontinental titles soon after his debut, and his character remains popular with fans to this day. Over the space of 20 years with the company, Reynolds has gone through many transformations, image changes, departures, and returns. Also, in his early run he had many opportunities to win the WWF title, yet was never victorious. Maybe because of the surrealism of the character, it was never seen as viable for Goldust to be the champion. Also, given how much controversy the character garnered when he debuted, let alone when he won the IC title, can you imagine what would have happened to the WWF's image at the time if he was awarded their top belt? Regardless, Goldust is a firm favourite in the eyes of fans, young and old today, and a place in the Hall of Fame is likely at some point because of it. Number 4. Farouk. Ron Simmons began life as a football star, becoming an All-American at Florida State before going into the NFL. While playing in Tampa, he met future wrestler Lex Luger, and as his football career ended, he joined Jim Crockett Promotions, which would become WCW. And after much success as part of the tag team Doom, his singles push led him to defeat Vader to become the first ever African-American WCW champion in 1992. After a stint in ECW, Simmons arrived in the WWF as Farouk Assad, later shortened to Farouk, and formed the Nation of Domination, loosely based on the Nation of Islam and the Black Panther groups. As a result of the comparison, the group received some negative press, due to its somewhat racist tones, although the group for long periods was mixed race. Following an attempt to win the WWF title against The Undertaker in 1987, the Nation splintered into 3 groups, as members Crush and Savio Vega created the DOA and Los Boricuas, respectively, leading to gang warfare. Along with the USA-Canada feud occurring in the WWF at the same time, having Farouk hold the title could have added to both storylines. One could argue that The Undertaker as a gimmick didn't need the title. Also, the run with the belt could have given bigger exposure to younger members of the Nation, such as The Rock and D'Lo Brown, who would go on to be big stars in their own right. Number 3. Dan the Beast Severn. One of the most legit tough guys in professional and amateur wrestling, Dan Severn holds several collegiate titles and records, was an All-American and US Olympian, and is a former UFC Superfight champion and Hall of Famer, with over 100 MMA wins. So surely, when Severn arrived in the WWF in 1998 during the NWA Invasion angle, in the middle of his first of 2 runs as NWA Heavyweight Champion, which he would eventually hold for just over 4 years, and with Jim Cornette as his mouthpiece, a run in the main event scene seemed obvious. He immediately went into a feud with real-life rival Ken Shamrock, whom he had many battles with in UFC, and aligned himself with Owen Hart before feuding with Hart later in the year. In a way, Severn was portrayed similarly to Goldberg. Speak little, kick butt for 2 minutes, and leave. However, Severn had the technical prowess as well as the power, and every bout felt like an MMA contest. Unfortunately, during the WWF's Attitude Era, with all its campy characters and storylines, Severn just didn't fit in with what the company was pushing. He wasn't much of a talker, and that was an issue for many. But then, he had Cornette, one of the best talkers the industry has ever seen. After dropping out the Brawl for All after one match and reaching the King of the Ring semi-finals, he left the company in 1999 to the annoyance of many who saw it as a massive missed opportunity. Number 2. Ken Shamrock. Much like Dan Severn, Ken Shamrock was a known, legitimate tough guy from the world of MMA when he arrived in the WWF. He made his debut as a special guest referee for the Bret Hart-Steve Austin submission match at WrestleMania 13. Following an altercation with Hart after the match, Shamrock feuded with the members of the Hart Foundation for most of 1997, ending the year by facing Shawn Michaels for the WWF title. He then went into a feud with The Rock that would run for most of 1998. Firstly over The Rock's Intercontinental title, as the champion in his group, The Nation, would thwart him at every turn. Shamrock would get his own back by beating The Rock in the finals of the King of the Ring tournament, an honour which traditionally leads to a main event push. The feud would then continue over the number one contendership for the WWF title, with Mankind also thrown into the mix. After failing in that feud, Shamrock joined Mr. McMahon's corporation and would win the Intercontinental title and later the tag team titles. However, as the corporation feuded with and then joined forces with the Ministry of Darkness, Shamrock left the group and competed against martial arts rival Steve Blackman for several months, before leaving the company in late 1999 to return to MMA. Again, due to his actual big fight status, the man dubbed the world's most dangerous man could have ruled the main event scene for a long time. But again, his intense look and lack of mic skills meant he was overlooked for the likes of Austin, Rock and Mankind. And number 1, Owen Hart. When he began wrestling for his dad Stu's promotion Stampede Wrestling in the mid-80s, many people saw Owen Hart as one of the biggest wrestling stars in North America, which given his bloodline isn't too much of a surprise, and many believed that given the chance, Owen could well have surpassed the accomplishments of his brother Bret. By 1994, Bret and Owen were engaged in one of the greatest and most personal feuds in modern times, and having great matches along the way, including the opening match at WrestleMania 10, and following Owen's King of the Ring victory, their 5-star cage match at SummerSlam for the WWF title. Then, the push just seemed to end. Bob Backlund became involved in the feud, with Owen causing Bret to lose the title by convincing his mother to throw in the towel for his son, which allowed the title to be passed on to Diesel a few days later. Owen prevented Bret from winning the title back at the Royal Rumble. Bret retired by jumping his brother as he entered the Rumble match, leading Owen to be eliminated in just 2 seconds. Then Bret won the rivalry quietly before WrestleMania 11, at which point, Owen would return to tag team competition to great success. Which is fine, but there was so much mileage in the Bret-Owen feud. They always had excellent matches, and doing so could have cut the Diesel experiment by a few months, giving Owen a run at the title as a sneaky heel champion before setting up one last match with Bret. Perhaps a different chain of events may have meant Owen wasn't in the rafters over the age of 99, when tragedy struck the wrestling world and he died at the age of 34. But then again, that's the point of this debate. Each entry is full of what-ifs. All we can do as fans is discuss and dream about what could have been. And that's my list. Is there anyone you think I missed? Who was your top pick? Let me know in the comments section. And if you haven't already, take a look back at my previous video, highlighting stars from the Hulkamania era who I feel should have won the WWF title. Remember to like and share this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, click the bell for notifications as a new video will be released every Monday, and follow me on Twitter at the handle on screen. This has been the Wrestling World according to Brad. Thanks for listening.